of the electorate bothering to vote. So why have we grown to be so apathetic towards politics? Why is it that 79% of the public say they can't trust their MP? Apathy. Apathy is a barometer of people's disconnection to the established political parties. Which begs the question, are they finished in the UK? Here's the political spectrum. On the very left, we have socialist ideology, and on the very right, neoliberalism. We used to be presented with two rather polarised parties, left-wing Labour and right-wing Conservative. But what's the situation now? Centralisation of the political ideologies. The similarities between their manifestos has created the disillusion in politics, increasing the apathetic attitude towards voting. At the last election, the turnout was 60%, compared to 76% 35 years ago, showing the lack of motivation to vote accumulating over the last few years. In 1979, the clear division between the policies meant that whether Thatcher or Callaghan were voted into power would fundamentally affect the country. However, since Blair's New Labour, the centralisation of the manifestos have never been so concentrated, muddying the water for the British public. So, what is the result of this disregard towards the established political parties? The fringe parties enter the arena. Once considered to be a protest vote and not much of a threat, certain fringe parties, such as UKIP and the Greens, have gained support and have snatched a significant amount of votes from the main parties, stirring up a political storm in Britain. But the real danger that's carried with the increasing support of these parties is that they only tend to focus on the hot topic being spoken about currently, and don't bother complaining about general issues such as healthcare and education. I'd like you to raise your hand if you're aware of UKIP's policies towards Britain remaining in the EU. Now I'd like you to raise your hand if you're aware of UKIP's policies towards education. So, evidently, the public's hunger for political change is resulting in voting for a party based on a single issue, as opposed to policies concerning day-to-day affairs. So when we're not presented with these clear differences between the Labour and Tory parties, what do we resort to? Attacking personality rather than policy. The media is constantly publishing MP slip-ups in any way possible, whether it's the way Miliband tragically eats his bacon rolls, or Osborne's choice to eat a Byron burger rather than McDonald's. We are living through the era of celebrity politics, the appearance and glamour of the MP being the focus of attention, rather than the party's agendas. From 1955 to 1985, the average age of the Prime Minister was 60, whereas, post-1985, a significantly younger 46 was the average age, supporting the idea of trendiness emerging in recent politics. They are desperately trying to get the support of the younger voters, while still trying to fit the media's ideal. Since the start of New Labour, the prominence of spin doctors and media-influenced politics overtook the traditional format, becoming more and more superficial, rather than focusing on the content of the policies. Although New Labour were instrumental in creating this glamorous world of politics, 15 years on, the new world of media scrutiny means that politicians' mistakes made on a personal level can become a publicised drama within minutes. Therefore, you could argue that the established political parties have created their very own Frankenstein. Stop voting. Stop pretending. Wake up. You're in reality now. Were the words of a preaching Russell Brand on BBC Two's Newsnight in 2013. There's going to be a revolution, he says to a rather bemused Paxman. This is the end. Are the fringe parties the only threat to be established? Or do figures like Russell Brand, who sweeten his rants with polysyllabic words and charming jokes when offloading his ideas about revolution, have more of an effect on stirring up politics than the fringe parties do? With the 7 million followers he obtains on Twitter, some may think so. I wonder how many politicians would crave an audience that large on social media. So, after exploring the root causes of apathy and the discontent with politics, I took a step back. Is it fair to simply tarnish the established political parties as finished? British politics is undeniably changing, but who says it has to be for the worst? Like many other 16-year-olds, I will be able to vote in 2 years. So, on behalf of everybody in my position, I'd like to entreat the established political parties to please give us something distinctive and relevant to vote for, or the sacrifice of the people at Peterloo would have been for nothing.
Increasing actively in the UK?
Definitely. So career politicians, as soon as they come out, lots of politicians come out of uni straight away and go straight into politics. So lots of people can't relate to these kind of career politicians because some may say that they haven't had enough life experience to be in power and to relate to normal people in Britain. So definitely, there's a lack of trust when people are career politicians because you feel as if, well, you haven't gone to work properly, you haven't been in business, how can I relate to you? So definitely that is a problem.
You said that there was a lack of trust for MPs, but also that you don't like the media's coverage of them as personalities, opposed to political leaders. To what extent do you think that this coverage will help people identify with them and trust the politicians more?
Well, the way media are displaying our politicians is usually quite in a negative light. So it's usually quite, it's quite criticising the way they talk about politicians, which means that we don't know the good stuff about our politicians really anymore. It's usually all the worst stuff is published straight away. So definitely we'll be able to trust politicians when we start seeing them in a normal light, and the way the media are portraying them at the moment kind of increases our isolation towards them. It increases the segregation between the politicians and the public.
You spoke about young MPs attracting younger voters, but would you say it's better to have an older Prime Minister or a younger Prime Minister?
So, as I said, before 1985, 60 was the average age for the Prime Minister. So, in a way, lots of people viewed, for example, Winston Churchill as quite wise, quite old, and he had lots of experience, whereas some people might argue that David Cameron is quite young and he doesn't have as much life experience as some others would think. So, in a way, we can say that politicians, older ones, could be considered wiser and older, but also younger politicians, they can maybe relate to situations such as social media, maybe better than older Prime Ministers could.
You were saying that the media is portraying it in a negative light. Do you think that if the media stopped portraying them as celebrities and started focusing on the policies that were being pushed through, that would help to distinguish between the parties more, or do you think that they're all just similar all the time?
I think that would make it easier. It would make it a lot clearer for the British public because we'd be able to see the clear divisions, and then because that should be what's in focus, the policy rather than the politician's personality. It should be what the party stands for and how they can help the country. So definitely, if we focus more on the policies, we'd be able to see the clearer differences, or if not, they'd realise that we can see the fact that they are very centralised and they'll do something about it. So yes, definitely.